Hi, and welcome to Ask the Manager. We have our town meeting member from Precinct 1 with us today, Carlos Garcia. Carlos graduated from Shrewsbury High, and he is a student at Assumption College and was recently elected as a town meeting member in a very highly contested race. So he worked hard and he won, and here he is. Now we're going to put him on the spot and let him be a part of Ask the Manager. So, Carlos, welcome, and we'll let you ask the first question.
Well, thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here. So, at Assumption, I'm currently taking an American political thought course where we discuss and debate various ideals in America. So, I'd like to ask you to give an answer to one of the topics we've discussed. What's your response to the idea that freedom is the meaning of America?
Whoa.
And I promise it's not my homework. So.
Freedom is the meaning of America. I don't know that it's the meaning of America. I think it's an ideal of America that we're still trying to strive to get to, and it's something that will always be out there ahead of us. That is a good thing that it's always out there ahead of us. Yeah. So, freedom is, can certainly mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and it has meant a lot of different things to a lot of different generations. I think it's something that every generation will have to continue to fight for and fight towards. Again, I think that's a really good thing, but I don't think it's the meaning of America. I think it's why a lot of people have come here. And I also think that it's why we all, most people have stayed. Yeah. And I think it's the realization that, you'll never get there and it'll always evolve is something that's helpful. That's a really interesting question.
And just for the record, the town manager never knows who the guest is going to be, and he never knows the questions. Half the time we don't know the questions. But so that was off the cuff, and I thought you did a good job.
Thank you. Good. Just very good. And I think that leads very well with my next question. So across the country, we have seen a large number of young people starting to get involved politically, whether that's participating in marches or contacting their local officials, or even running for office themselves. Mm-hmm. So as a person who has a lot of experience in municipal government, what would your advice be to the young person who wants to get involved?
Yeah, my advice is to get involved sooner rather than later. You always tend to feel like an outsider when you're first engaging in an issue. But once you go to one or two meetings and do your own research and come up to speed, then you gain that confidence and you realize that you are comfortable, or you'll become more comfortable, and you can engage within the room and make meaningful contributions. I think that's not an ideal, but it's a premise of everything that our government here in the U.S. is based upon. It's civic engagement, and I had the wonderful opportunity earlier this week on Tuesday to go to Mr. Aloisi's American government class and meet with that semester's group, and we had a really fun, spirited conversation on the special town meeting that's coming up on April 3rd relative to recreational marijuana, and that group will be there. And I hope our conversation there kind of points out some things that they should look at. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities. I think that's what everyone should realize. And the other part that I think is important is it doesn't have to be contentious and polarizing, and you're only coming out because you disagree with something. You can come out to agree on things and just learn and to engage and be a part of the community. And I think it's really enriching when people do that. Oftentimes, when you get into local government or any level of government, you do only hear from people, when they want to tell you what you're doing wrong. But whenever I go to those evening meetings that we do so many times, like we'll do tonight, I see a lot of people trying to make a difference, and they've invested time in it and they've thought about it, and sometimes their opinion's different than staff, sometimes it's different than mine, sometimes it's the same, but I know why they're there, and it's important to have everyone's voice involved. And yeah, I guess it it doesn't always have to be negative or come out in response to something. Just come out, I think, is the main part.
Right. And I think it's great that you actually brought up Mr. Aloisi, because it was in his class where I learned about town meeting and the local government process. So I give him a lot of credit for even me being a town meeting member. And you alluded to the special town meeting that we'll have on the 23rd. And I think that there's a very real possibility that neither the ban nor the regulation articles could pass, could meet the 2/3 threshold needed to pass. So what would the next steps look like in trying to resolve that issue?
Sure. So if neither article were to pass, we'll still be under the force of the moratorium that's currently in place through November. And with that moratorium in place, the whole ideal behind the moratorium was to give the community the opportunity to have a dialogue and make its own decisions, on its own terms. So again, that would stay in place. And I think it'll be important, and I certainly will be, for everyone, not just on the stage, but mainly the folks on the stage, to be paying attention and listening, because in some ways, it's if neither of them pass, we have to really understand why they didn't and how we go back, right? It's a legislative process. That's what town meeting is, and sometimes things don't always pass, and carrying a 2/3 hurdle is certainly a challenge on contentious issues. So we'll have to see what we can learn that evening and find a path back. I don't disagree with you that because of the 2/3 hurdle that there may be an opportunity, but I guess I want to know, and it's one of the points that I'm going to stress tonight at the Finance Committee, if I'm given the opportunity to make a couple opening comments, is that it's not the end of the world. We're not going into the Wild West. It's not going to be lawless that if it doesn't pass. If it's not the right time for it to pass, or someone has other ideas that need to be considered, then we should do that.
Now, what's the urgency of having it now and not waiting for more issues to play out?
So the urgency now is that applications are in process. We've actually heard about, we've heard from a lot of businesses, the one that exists in town, and heard from a few other businesses that are interested in coming to town as we got closer and closer to April. And a lot of that is still medically based. They're saying they want to open, but the reality is stores can be open as early as July. So we do have the moratorium in place that would prevent that, but the application process, the way it's set up through the Cannabis Control Commission, is they can continue to make progress through that and be moving towards their site, kind of in anticipation of us making our final decision. So we're safe in some ways, but asking the question on April 23rd, if there's no clear answer, gives us the opportunity to think, hear, listen, and then come back to town meeting in a reasonable time. And you know how summer is, right? We don't want to do anything in the summer because inherently someone's going to be gone and away, and then it's the beginning of the school year. So
part of the article, one of the articles for town meeting is establishing the fine scale. Do you think that the fine is high enough? I mean, the first offense is $50. Do you think anybody cares if it's only $50 if they violate it? I mean, and that would be to be in possession or to be consumption on public property. So do you think anybody cares about $50?
I would think so, to be honest with you. I mean, I know it's not a large sum of money, but with non-criminal disposition, we have the ability to make that stick and force that payment. And it's not a life-changing number. I think it certainly would make you think about it. It's more than a parking ticket.
So medical marijuana is already approved for Shrewsbury.
Correct.
So someone asked me, why do we have to have marijuana dispensaries? Why can't we get marijuana that's medical in a pharmacy like we get all the rest of the medicine? Do you have any idea why?
Because the state chose not, well, I don't know I don't know what, I should back up. So I don't know what corporate pharmacies think about marijuana. I don't know of any models where they're dispensing through that common accepted medicinal dispensing model of a pharmacy. The state's clearly, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has clearly set it up as a different process for that. I really think it's because it used to be the controlled substance that it is, and it's not going through an FDA process, and it's not federally recognized. So the more I talk, the more I'm convincing myself it will never be in CVS.
Well, and the other part to that is I think it's more complex and more complicated than dispensing some of the medicine in pill form or liquid form. It seems to be more complicated, and I don't know, but people ask that question.
Reading some of the other proposed regulations in regards to the question, I thought one that was interesting to me was that in regards to ventilation, it states that the odor of marijuana can't be detected anywhere outside of the establishment. So I guess I was wondering how that provision would be monitored.
Yeah, so believe it or not, we already have certain businesses that operate in the community that have to adhere to that. And they have very intensive mechanical processes and systems in place that we have to meet noise requirements and all that stuff. So it's not something really that's new to us. The process of enforcement, everything related to recreational marijuana, I shouldn't say everything, there's probably a few exceptions, but that'll all be done by the Cannabis Control Commission. So there's really not a lot of local enforcement that will be involved. Certainly if that were the case, citizens can reach out to the town and we'll help direct them or get in contact with our colleagues at the state. But all that enforcement type of activities as it relates will come through the Cannabis Control Commission.
With, I don't know what you call them, where people go and smoke like they do cigars, a cigar place or whatever.
Private clubs.
Right. If they had waitresses in those types of places, could they then turn around and say that their health's affected by it?
I would guess so.
Because they've been exposed? I mean, has anyone thought of that? Not that that's an answer for us, but when you think about it, if you are serving that, you are in an environment where you're exposed. So will the exposure actually have an impact at some time?
I would think
That's
so.
interesting. I guess moving on to the annual town meeting, I know that this will be your first Shrewsbury annual town meeting with 46 articles on the warrant. So how's that process been like, and who's really guided you through that?
Yeah, so the process, I think we're shaping up to have a pretty boring annual town meeting. A lot of similar articles that we've had in the past.
Zoning.
A lot of credit to the staff that have been in place for so long in town. A lot of effort was put into it by the assistant town manager, Kristen Lass. She certainly, has had the lead in developing, a lot of the articles and keeping us in line with the things that we need to wrap up on the zoning. But the town planner and the individual town departments that you'll notice throughout the warrant that are closely tied to that really have the lead in all that and making sure that we have it go on. So it's been a pretty good process so far. It does take a lot of time for us to develop that, even though a lot of it is repetitive. Whether it's making sure that we have all the articles in there that we need, trying to assess what we don't have, and a lot of the articles become placeholders and what may seem like a one-sentence article related to the personnel board, as we're looking to make organizational changes that we'll start to talk about in the next few weeks, become tied to a 7-page or 8-page memo that we really got to dive down into the details on to make sure people have the best information that they can. So we're actually in the process right now beginning to develop the books that will go out relative to the budget and the other guidance documents. So it lands in the mail and gets to your homes, early in May, but we've been thinking about it and working on it since February to get it in line. So, there will be a lot of, there is shaping up to be a lot of interesting changes related to personnel if we can continue to muscle through them.
And it was very thoughtful and good planning to have the marijuana articles be in a totally separate town meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Because otherwise, we could have been at the one in May for weeks.
Yeah, I think it would have added a night
Yeah,
without a
yeah.
doubt.
Yeah.
Yep.
Have you had any conversations with Dan Morgado about any?
Sure,
Yeah.
of course, yeah. It's probably been 6 or 8 weeks, maybe a little bit longer since I've talked to him, but of course, he was very gracious, in 2 aspects. One, to meet with me at any point in time and have confidential conversations, and I've certainly taken him up on that. And 2, to tell me that he was going to leave me alone. He'd never sneak in the building, and he's a true professional, and I'm sure it's hard to give up the reins. I don't know what that's like. Actually, I kind of do, because if you look back to the towns that you've worked in and see what's going on there, I'm sure he's had thoughts about what he may have done, but he's been, a professional still outside of the role, and hasn't opined when it wasn't asked of him. So it's been good. We've had a lot of good conversations, though. It's been very helpful.
Good.
Yeah.
So thinking ahead, after the annual town meeting, are there any other foreseeable issues or questions that you think we'll have to answer as a community?
Well, really, with the recreational marijuana on the table, and once we get through the annual town meeting, we'll definitely allow the community to take the summer off, but there are still big there's still big questions that are coming forward. The main one that I can think of right now, actually I can think of 3 or 4 that we're already lining up for a fall town meeting, as crazy as that may be. The biggest one will be the Beal project.
Yeah.
We'll be at a position of maturity with that project where we'll be able to ask town meetings consideration for borrowing authorization for that project. Timing that for the end of October, early November, in order to have a ballot question congruent with the state biennial election in November for a debt exclusion that will require debt exclusion. It's a large dollar value project, somewhere around $90 million to construct that school. So that's one question. There are other things that are out there that we'll look to kind of enable and I think potentially see if the community thinks improve operations. One of those questions will be an enterprise fund relative to stormwater to help us address our stormwater concerns. And potentially moving the water department into a similar financial arrangement in an enterprise fund. So definitely a lot of questions. When I think about the summer, though, we've mentioned it several times in this show and other hearings and meetings talking about an organizational assessment. So we had a consultant that came in and has done a lot of work to understand what my management style is, how the community's operated, what direction we think we need to go in, identifying classic strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and trying to modernize, how we're going to operate. And we have a draft document that I'm beginning to have conversations with a number of staff about, and we'll start to go out to other boards and committees, and it will kind of make itself very apparent as we go to town meeting, because I'd like to reclassify a few positions at that time. So there'll be a lot of internal shifting going on in town hall and around town hall if we're able to make some of those changes and it makes sense to other folks. So I'm happy about the opportunities that could present for the town.
Yeah, sounds like an exciting process.
It is an interesting project, yeah.
In regards to the Beal School property, what's your vision for what should go in the current lot?
My only vision is it shouldn't be the town's building. We don't have any real need for that office space. I know Dr. Sawyer and his staff don't have a need for school administrative space there. The Beal Reuse Committee has met a few times and attempted to have they did have a public hearing, but thought maybe it was just a little premature. They did try to have it right at the outset to just get feedback from the public, but they probably need to do a little bit more work and develop some concepts internally and then have something more for folks to react to rather than just come in and comment. So they're going to work on that. But it's obviously right in the center of town.
Yeah.
And earlier this month, a group of business owners and town staff members got together to start to talk about a town center business district. To kind of organize themselves the way the Lakeway Business District has and use that successful model to try to do some revitalization efforts in the downtown. So I'd love to see it to be a part or piece of that. We're going to study it. We're doing a parking study in the town center as well to try to improve that, especially when we get to the winter months and there's really no options for folks. That hurts business.
Selectman Kane talked about modeling the new school after Sherwood. Can you adapt a grammar school and a middle school? Is there common planning?
There's a lot of interesting concepts that are being carried through from Sherwood. One of the biggest advantages that we have is we're using the same architect. Some of the things that have been talked about is kind of the community environment. I'm not sure if I'm getting that term exactly right, but how the school is organized. You know, potting classrooms together with, if you go into Sherwood, you know, you walk down a somewhat narrow hallway and then it balloons out into these common spaces where teachers and students can interact in common areas and actually provides another dimension for educational services and social interaction for those kids. So that concept has been discussed and should be carried through in the new project. And then we'll just build upon the successes of the types of materials and the way that the building is constructed and the systems that are used within it, that we've had a lot of success. I mean, Sherwood's a beautiful building, and some of the things that you don't realize if you're not thinking about it, but the height of the tile on the wall to keep it clean and easy to clean and you know, prevent, you know, things from being damaged and looking tired after a few years because they're materials that could be impacted by students. So just things like that helps keep our buildings looking beautiful, and a lot of hard work from our custodial staff goes into that as well, but designing it right from the outset helps.
So to stay on the subject of the Beale School project, are we any closer to coming to resolution with the state around Glavin?
I actually had a conversation earlier today. It is within the House Ways and Means Committee, and it's Representative Kane is pushing to make sure it receives the attention that it needs to. We're on track as long as it keeps moving through that committee and gets its proper hearing and action taken on it while they're in session. It's actually a good time. They're very busy, but it's good that they're busy and not meeting. It will remain an option. I don't think the legislative process is going to create a hurdle for that.
Is there a lot of hazardous soil, or will there be an expensive mitigation process for Glavin or for Centec North?
Yes, we've had some geotech analysis done on the Centec North property. We're actually worried because it was an apple orchard, I guess, at one time.
Allen property, right?
Allen property. So we've had some testing for arsenic and lead, and the results came back, you know, without any issues. So that's good. It keeps that site as an option. Glavin will need some remediation as it relates to the building, right there on the site proper. Probably a little bit of asbestos, yeah, and just anything else that would go along with that 1960s, 70 era building. It's definitely a different cost than the Allen Farm property. The Beale Early Childhood Center Building Committee will be receiving revised preliminary schematic design cost estimates, or PSR, preliminary site estimates, which will be another revision from the first estimates they've seen. It will kind of be a new line in the sand as far as what we think it may cost and what changes may need to be made at that point. So those will actually be getting the committee in to discuss at the committee in their April 24th meeting.
And the school building assistance reimbursement would not include any of those types of costs, but is there an
No.
opportunity to get funding? I mean, is it a realistic opportunity to get funding in another form through the state?
I honestly don't think so.
No?
The demo, so there's no site acquisition costs. The overall site development costs are capped at 8% of the total project value, and even if you were to start with a nice, beautiful, flat level piece of green grass like this table, you're going to exceed 8% of the building cost in your site development. So really the cost of the acquisition of the property, which we will have to pay for it from the state, and the demolition of that property, the buildings on the property will come at the non-matched cost of the town.
Well, that'll certainly be something to keep watching.
Yeah.
Recently, both Senator Mike Moore and State Representative Hannah Kane announced that Shrewsbury would be set to receive nearly $1 million to go into repairing municipal roads and bridges. I know that process isn't finalized yet, but how and where would the town use that money?
So Chapter 90, which those funds come through, it's a chapter within the state law where the state's actually authorized to borrow funds for roadway improvements, is the heart of our all of our efforts on highways and roads within the community. So we'll use that $1 million. It doesn't go very far for any resurfacing projects and any surface treatment projects. So that would range from things like mill and overlay projects where we're going to come through and dig up the road or tear up the asphalt and then lay new asphalt down. And it would also be used for surface treatments like chip seal projects and things like that. So again, that's really the heart of it. Over the past several years, we've actually stockpiled some of that money and have been out to bid and awarded a bid to construct a new salt shed at the highway garage, and that will actually be done this summer. And work will be underway within the next month or so on that. So that's a much needed change from a capital standpoint because we have an aging building that's been there for 40 or 50 years, but also it's brings some environmental benefits to it as well.
Right.
It'll be more of a watertight facility, better to operate from. So we're looking forward to undertaking that. But yeah, Chapter 90 is really the heart. So all the paving projects that you see going on in town, that's what that money is used on.
That's interesting. And actually going off the environmental aspect of that you had mentioned, I understand that in September, we as a town voted to adopt the stretch energy code, which is one of the 5 criteria the town needed to meet in order to apply for a green community designation. And I know also at that time we had already met 2 requirements. So where are we in that process, and how soon could we become a green community?
Sure. So we'll look to apply by the deadline on October 30th of 2018. That should put us in line to receive a check from the Commonwealth sometime in the late winter or early spring of 2019. We have worked on it since that point in time. We're currently still undergoing the energy audit, which we will use to create the plan to reduce our energy consumption in all town buildings by 20%. So we have consultants and our internal staff, and CMRPC is working with us to develop that energy baseline that we'll use to compare our improvements to. We haven't taken a lot of action on the fuel efficient vehicle policy, but that's really just a paper policy that we'll put in place and have to adhere to, but that's not a big lift. So those are the last 2 things that we'll have to overcome and then submit the application, but we will meet that deadline by October 31st.
Good, because I know that's something that a lot of us in the community were pretty excited about, just to help us reduce energy costs and use. So, and
if I could just hop in there too. So it's a small part of the budget, or you could argue it's a small part of the budget. We spend about $150,000 a year on streetlights. Well, Selco had undertaken a major project and then received a grant and made their project even bigger to replace a lot of the streetlights in the community. And we're really starting to see the payback on that. We were able to reduce the streetlight budget by about $20,000 this year. So,
Oh, wow.
so that reflects the
That's pretty
energy
good.
cost, of that, and we'll actually enjoy similar reductions over the course of the next 3 years from that. So. It's very rare that any municipal
Something
budget
good.
declines, right? So, not only are we saving energy and helping the environment, but we're also paying less money. I think now it costs about $30 a year for the energy usage for a streetlight, which is a lot. I mean, the selectmen still comment on it, even month after month, about when we're installing a new streetlight, the estimated cost is $32, and they kind of chuckle, because it used to be up around 80.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a big difference.
So I guess speaking generally now to local happenings, how can we better reach out to people to let them know about what's going on in town? Because I feel like a lot of the times there is a disconnect between, say, citizens and decisions made at town meeting.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think we need to continue to find more ways. We do communicate in a lot of conventional ways through the website. We have a Twitter account. We don't have any other social media focus. We have a few Twitter accounts. But we do need to find more ways to engage with the community and find avenues where it's easy for folks to receive information. So I know what was at one time the panacea of let's have a town website and all the information will be there has turned into, well, that's even too much work for me to go to the town website to find out what's going on.
It's convoluted.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, so we do have to find new ways. And one of the things that I talked about way back, it's been a year ago now that I think we sat down for an interview.
Oh, wow.
Is, a lot of communities are developing what they call community engagement plans. And it's not just a document that says, we'll post on Twitter and things like that. It really takes a project-based approach and says, if we're going to have a project like this, we want the community to have kind of a spectrum of level of engagement, from let's just inform you to let's have you make the decision. So, and everywhere in between, depending on the type of project that we're actually considering and how much it's perceived it will impact, good or bad, the public, we would, line that up with that spectrum. So it's something that I'd like to work on, and it's something that hopefully we'll have the opportunity to work on in the next 12 to 18 months. Once we get really the opportunity to look at making some changes within the organization and doing some restructuring and I think changing a lot of the management approach. I'd love to go to a much more performance-based organization that's based upon strategies and goals that we all agree to at the beginning of the year, and then everyone works toward and knows what their role is in that. So I think that'll make us more efficient and also allow us to see more progress on an annual basis. So along with that comes some additional resources that we need to place into it. So that's always the challenge, because they're not unlimited and they're competing with a lot of other different things. So, but we can do a lot of stuff at low or no cost too, that have been identified in that report that we'll start talking about over the course of the next month or so.
And I know on the annual town meeting warrant, there's a petition, or citizens petition to have the committee study the effectiveness of electronic voting. I don't know if you could have a say in how you think that would go, but I guess how would that process look if that were to pass?
So my opinions on that would be that if we're going to use it, it should be used, for every vote. But then there's a lot of policy decisions I think town meeting as a body needs to make for itself. So I'll kind of just lay those out. One is, what's the purpose? Is it to speed the meeting? Is it to broadcast, live results as they're going on, and how could that influence the process if that's what's really happening? Is it to identify the votes of the members that are sitting there so people can go back and see how you voted on a particular issue? So I think all those things are in play, and how you use the system will really be defined by why you're putting it in place. So I think the technology's there and all those things, but how you use it is the key. And I think also how you present that it's going to be used will be how much support you get. Is gotten.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head how many, if a lot of other communities do that?
There's a growing number. I don't know the statistics on it. I know a lot of surrounding communities use it. I've heard, which is common. Some communities started using it and don't want to use it anymore.
Right.
Some communities are still trying to get involved, and I think it's a good right step to study it and make all of those decisions rather than just purchasing, the system and putting it in place and then thinking about the impacts of it.
So some have suggested that citizens' petitions on the annual town meeting warrant tend to draw out our meetings across several nights, and I know we see when town meeting takes longer, attendance goes down pretty significantly. Does that concern you at all, or do you think we should? Is there a way that we could speak to that?
Well, citizens' petitions don't concern me.
Right.
I certainly think they have a very important role in the legislative process. Too much power would be seceded from that body if that option wasn't there. So generally speaking, and walking away from the citizens petition thing, as we talked about, there's always that question about representative town meeting, open town meeting, town, city council, whatever it is. And if you look to Framingham, who just changed, their reason that they changed is their annual town meeting was taking 15 or 20 nights.
Really? Wow.
So, I don't know if that was because of citizens petitions, and I'm not saying that's why it was, but I think that kind of to one of the points that you may have been asking or making in the question is how many nights is too much, and when do people walk away because it's just too much of a drain on their life. That is something that concerns me, and so I think that town meeting needs to still remain efficient, as we work through it. And there's still 10% of the articles, 4 out of the 45, so to speak, are citizens petition articles. So, but they're often some of the more controversial issues. So.
Right. Yeah, because I think citizens petitions are a great way for residents and town meeting members to directly impact their community. If they see an issue, they can address it, and I think that's a great testament to our democratic process. So I also agree. I don't have an issue with citizens petitions themselves. I guess going in a different direction, are there any policies or anything that other communities in the area have that you would like Shrewsbury to adopt?
From a town meeting standpoint, or just
in general?
Just generally speaking. It's a good broad question. I mentioned earlier, I don't know if it's a policy or not. I do think that I'd like to see a little more structure in the water department and move that into an enterprise fund. It's sort of a policy decision. It takes a little bit of we've had a lot of good luck and a lot of good discipline at town meeting to be moving those funds, from free cash and into an account. But as we are dealing with more environmental challenges and things like that, I want to make sure that enterprise funds are set up not only so you can't kind of overinflate the tax rate through a fee process, but it also protects, the critical operation of a certain aspect of the town. So I just see putting an enterprise fund, gives a little protection to the water funds that are out there, which is, it's a big number. It's, it's around $6 million a year. So, and then I think we need to write a lot of policies and stand up our personnel practices internally to the town. We don't have an HR department. It's something that was, an HR position was recommended through the organizational assessment. We don't have a lot of policies, procedures, or even common practices, which I think is a huge liability for us. We've been lucky so far, I'll call it that we haven't had personnel issues that has cost the town a lot of money, but personnel issues can cost the town a lot of money. So I think we need to address that from a policy standpoint. So it's something that with the organizational changes that we would look to be focusing on a little bit more. As the town has grown and resources have still been limited, that's, it's a challenging position to fund.
Yeah.
It's not someone that's out there in the street doing the work that people can see, so it often gets cast aside. So, yeah.
Can an HR department be combined with the school department?
It could
Or
be. Yeah, certainly.
So that you maximize.
Right.
I know it would be very busy, but
Mm-hmm.
you'd be able to have some people do the same common
Right.
tasks.
Right. Yeah.
How does your experience here in Shrewsbury compare to your previous role as a
Yeah.
town administrator from Leicester?
It's a lot different. Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, the scope of everything is still the biggest difference. There's a lot going on. We're a full service community that takes a lot of pride in doing everything as professionally as possible, and that takes an awful consistent, fast pace. I have not had any day where I haven't had something to do every second since I've been here, so which is good and bad. So it's really just a scope thing. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of complexities. There's a lot of reasons the things are being done, how they're being done, and most, if not all of them, are right. And we'll look to make improvements from there. There's certainly a lot more direct authority in the position, in any other, versus my previous position that lies directly within the title that I have here. So, and along with that comes responsibility and thought, and you don't want to screw anything up and mess anything up, so to speak. So, it's quite different.
Yeah.
It really is.
It seems like you've adapted pretty well, and
Try.
the community the community seems to receive
Thank
you
you.
very well.
Yep.
So, what I guess was the biggest challenge for you to I guess adapt to our way of doing things?
Besides the commute.
Yeah,
Right.
no, that's not
I
so
always
bad.
have to bring that up.
Yeah, that's not so bad or so much longer. Probably the biggest challenge is delegation. Talk is cheap, and around that term, and there's no way anyone can do this on their own. And you have to have a lot of trust and reliance upon. There's a lot of things that go on in the town hall that have been going on since well before I got here, and every day since I haven't even thought of, and it just happens. You know what I mean? There's a lot of municipal employees, there are a lot of school employees that are excellent at their jobs and take that responsibility great, and it means that I haven't thought about it or heard about it. So I really appreciate their work and support. So just allowing those professionals to do what they do on a daily basis and not get in their way and be a problem for them has been a big change. And that certainly goes back to the scope, of things that are going on. But, we do a lot of stuff internally. We're designing our own water and sewer aspects of our own water and sewer infrastructure. We're out, on sites that are being developed, monitoring and making sure it's being done properly. So it's just a lot of folks doing a lot of good things on their own, and they're doing it right. So it's interesting to be in my seat some days.
So just to jump in, the selectmen voted to approve the health insurance rates.
Correct.
And I happened to see the memorandum that you had put out, which I thought was excellent. And it was informative, and I think it helped to get the employees to focus on the new options, because it's very different this year than what it's been. And for people who are healthy, it's like, oh, I'll pick this one. But for people with health conditions, they really have to look at those carefully. And you've set up insurance fears, health insurance fears.
Sessions.
Right.
Yep.
And so there's many opportunities that employees should take to have a good understanding about what they're getting into, because there's caps of deductibles, and some of them are high compared to others. And so you either pay up front or you take the gamble. And when people gamble because they don't want to pay that deductible, they may not go to the doctor, they may not go to the hospital or the emergency room because they just look at that expense and think, oh, I can get through it. So they need those health fairs in place so that they can really know what they're choosing and have a good understanding of it. But I think you've given the employees a good opportunity, and I think that, like I said, the memorandum really, I think, sets the tone for what they need to do, because there are big changes this year. And
yeah, we've seen a lot of participation at those and a lot of good questions. We have 2 more information sessions coming up for employees, one on April 24th at 9 o'clock in the morning, one on April 25th at 6:30 in the evening, to try to make sure we're available to answer everyone's questions. We'll have representatives from the health insurance providers and health equity, who we're going to use to manage our health savings account for those employees that want to take advantage of that. So it's a completely different but necessary environment that we're moving in for health insurance options for employees. And then earlier this week, on Tuesday at their meeting, the Board of Selectmen also voted to offer a 100% employee contribution dental plan, which will be the first time we've had a dental plan for municipal employees. There was a discount program through Feline, but it wasn't very robust, and it was kind of getting smaller every year. So we'll be offering that subject to enough people signing up, which I think is a good option for folks as well. So a lot of changes. 70% of our employees will have to make a change this year. They're on our legacy rate saver program. And despite moving from the rate saver program to the benchmark or the high deductible, the other two, premiums will go down for those employees, because it's a different model. Again,
Right.
it's you're paying up front or holding money, and so
Pay
you have
now
to
or
pay
pay
out.
later.
Exactly.
and it's a gamble.
Yeah, it is. It is. There's certainly risk and reward in that environment. So we're trying to do our best. We've had a lot of participation. I would guess that there's been over 300 employees come to those 4 events that we've had so far.
Good.
Yep.
Good. And are you involved at all yet with the turf field fundraising? The results of that?
Oh yeah. So it's done.
It's done.
It's done. Yeah. So
Did they meet their goal?
Yeah, one major final donation came in from the Adams family at $250,000.
Really? Wow.
That certainly
awesome.
they'll get their name on the.
You'll put it
on the
somewhere,
sign.
right?
Yeah, not me. A lot of hard work went in by Superintendent Dr. Sawyer and Assistant Superintendent Collins and his entire staff, and I'm sure a lot of parents and booster clubs and a lot of other folks that gave. Certainly every dollar counted, and they've achieved their goal, and we look to move rapidly to construction during the construction season this year.
So it'll be this year?
Well, we're going to try. I don't know yet, but they're setting on go, and they'll move quickly. And I'm not exactly sure. I don't want to overpromise, but
You don't have to wait for the fields to mature.
Right.
You don't have to wait for 2 growing seasons. It's
right,
ready.
Exactly. We'll be ready once it's in. So we're also going to redo the track, which has been on the no pun intended, on the sidelines while we waited on this project to see what was going to happen. So we should gain efficiencies from that. If nothing else, manage the cost difference from when it went out to bid a few years ago till now. Also look to expand some parking opportunities at the high school and drainage improvements up there. And hopefully you can wrap all that in with the good news of that project going forward. So.
Good. And it's the time of year where the field demands, there's more pressure for people reserving fields for sporting events and that. Have you felt that pressure yet? Or have you been involved with that, or you leave it all to Angela?
So Angela, it's one of those things that just goes on. That's handled by the staff that we have, but there certainly is a lot of demands. It's why a lot of communities, right, wrong, or indifferent, are moving to these turf fields, because they're ready to go the first day that the snow melts, unlike the grass surfaces. So we're getting everything lined up and scheduled, and the docks have been in for a month. On Lake Quincy, and I see rowers out there when I cross
I
the
know.
across
So
the bridge
cold.
in the morning. Yeah,
There's no way they
So-
want to fall in.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, activities are happening even if winter hasn't quite left us yet.
So we're not fully utilizing the Lake Street fields. Am I correct on that? Or are there? sporting events on those fields.
The by SAC or SAC?
Yeah, by
Park?
SAC.
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. I don't know how frequently they're used. Or
Because
not.
at some point, we'll need to look at the Lake Street Park to see if we're utilizing it to its maximum capacity and if there's other options to use that more effectively, because I bet that's not used as much as we could. But I could be wrong. I just haven't had to go to any. I don't want to interrupt if you have more questions.
Oh, no, I guess I just have one more. So it doesn't stop snowing.
Right.
It just does not seem to stop snowing. So how much of a strain has that put on the budget to clean up all of that? And
Yeah, so we're fortunate in the area of materials. We still have some funding left in the budget. We've actually overrun the salaries accounts, the overtime accounts that are dedicated, but not by a lot, to be honest with you. Only by about $7,500 at this point in the year, which means we'll need about $25,000 in a reserve fund transfer or some other form to get the highway department through the rest of the fiscal year. But even though it was rough and it was a little bit of a late blooming winter, the budget is really a lot more robust here than it is in most towns, so we're not really in a bad deficit situation.
Good. So spring cleanup, yard waste.
Yep.
There's scheduled weeks for yard waste collection and criteria. Is that all available on the website?
It's all available on the website. Those dates have been scheduled.
Is it easy to find on the website, or is
I'll look into that. we'll make it as
there
easy
needs
as
to be a
possible.
front page where
Right.
those hot button
Yeah.
issues show up?
So we'll get it back on the front page of the website. The yard waste collections have begun. They'll run for the next few weeks into early May. And then the brush and yard material drop off at the highway starts in June. And so we'll collect those materials at those times. So.
And Representative Kane sent us a letter yesterday, maybe, about the state funding. We making out better? Or?
Yeah, so a little bit better. So Chapter 70, which is education tuition, is the main change in the House Ways and Means budget versus the governor. So it's $10 additional per student, which works out to be around a little less than $50,000 additional, which is good. The superintendent developed a budget proposal reduction plan. His tier 3, which is the first tier that he would like to get through, and I've talked with him personally and tried to commit to get to, was about $260,000 from the initial budget proposal. So that $50,000 certainly helps. The cherry sheets I downloaded today, but then got pulled away, so I haven't had a chance to look at them in their totality, but I do look to have a revised budget proposal in front of the Board of Selectmen and over to the Finance Committee by early the week of the 24th. So, because then we have a hearing on the 26th, and we got to print the books for town meeting.
It's time.
Yep, it's time.
And the superintendent of schools came before the selectmen to talk about school safety. Were there any surprises? Or was it just informative?
Well, it was very informative. A lot of hard work goes into that, and I get to see just a small piece of that. The school department really does that on a very frequent basis, at least I would say a monthly basis, and they're probably yelling at me because they do it more probably a weekly basis. But we do think about that a lot. I was part of a reunification planning meeting, talk about what we do in events like that, what the town's role would be, how we'd set up emergency communications operations, who would go what, when, where kids would go, and what we'd do. So, you know, it's the amount of effort that's been put into the Shrewsbury Public Schools since, you know, the Connecticut shootings, and then, you know, every unfortunate event since thereafter makes us thinking about something new. It is something that we think about. We're talking about it with the Beal project. What can we do? What's new? What's the latest technology? How do we design the building right to make those things less easy to happen? So, yeah, I'm confident. You know, everyone should be confident that we're doing everything that we can. You know, we have student resource officers, which a lot of communities don't have. and we continue to make progress every day.
The Route 20 construction, is that moving on schedule?
Yes, and the Worcester side of things?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is their sewer construction project, which we are looking to tie into and partner with. So they're on schedule, and we look to get a series of approvals at the annual town meeting to be able to join in with them. We're just looking at some of the rate costs of flowing sewage that way versus sending it to Westboro. It's certainly a little bit of an increase, but I think it's manageable and well worth it for the economic development opportunities that it could unlock in the Route 20 corridor. So we'll have a lot to say about that at the hearings coming up with Finance Committee, and then as we go to town meeting. I think something like $6.5 million that we're looking for capital improvements within Route 20 as it relates to the sewer system.
And while we're on Route 20, any more progress with the Market Basket Edgemere property?
Progress. Yep, progress.
Anything exciting?
No, nothing exciting. It's the boring stages of it. No good or no bad announcements. Just kind of working through. The town has, put its head down as it relates to the rest of the Route 20 project. Not because of the Edgemere Drive-In redevelopment, but because that's what we need to do for the system. We're designing a new sewer pump station. We've been working with Barden Tri-Mount there on the corner at Lake Street to be able to build a new pump station on an easement on their property. And earlier this week, speaking of Route 20, we had a conversation about some preliminary thoughts that UPS may have in constructing a major new facility in Centec Park, both in Grafton, and try to pull a little bit over into Shrewsbury. So it's very, very preliminary. Nothing even pen to paper yet, except for some land agreements to take a look at it. So that's something that we'll be gearing up for as well.
And there's been activity at Feline Plaza?
Yeah, so the demolition is starting, and the Reliant Medical Group building will be underway. The UMass Shields facility will be receiving its certificate of occupancy probably before the next time that we get back here. Parking lot's being paved, and they'll be open within 6 weeks at the latest, would be my guess. So amazing facility, amazing good impact on the tax rate. So it's about a $20 million building.
That's great.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
$700
That's
a square feet, which is very significant, very high tech, very high end building. So we're happy to have them.
So when we see them put the stripes down for the parking spaces, it'll all be
It'll be ready to go.
getting closer
Yep.
and closer.
Nice.
Well, that was a fast hour.
It really was.
We're so glad that you were here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.